Good afternoon, and welcome to the Editor's Podcast for the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I am Dr. Linda Snutzelaar, Editor-in-Chief of the journal. With me today, I have Dr. Abigail Johnson, who is an assistant professor in the Division of Epidemiology and Community Health. She is also Associate Director of the Nutrition Coordinating Center in the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. And today we will be focusing on her article titled Assessing the Nutrient Content of Plant-Based Milk Alternative Products Available in the U.S. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you so much for having me.
So my first question is, why is the concept of plant-based milk products an important topic today as we look into nutrition matters?
We know that plant-based milks is this growing food category, and we're aware that there are more consumers than ever who are choosing plant-based milks for a variety of reasons, be it because they follow a vegetarian dietary pattern, they have some cultural eating tradition that they are adhering to, or they're aiming to eat a diet that has a lower environmental footprint. So dietitians need to be aware of the product category as a whole, because what we're finding is that the products vary widely in their nutritional content.
Thank you. So important to know. What are three important points that you would like readers to take away after reading your article?
Yeah, so we aimed to compare 219 plant-based milk alternatives with each other and with dairy milk. And I'd say the main finding is that we found that most products are not a one-to-one nutritional substitute for dairy milk. And we looked at the plant-based milk alternatives through a public health nutrition lens, where we tried to consider both nutrients that were commonly overconsumed, like sodium, added sugars, and saturated fats, and some that are commonly underconsumed, like calcium, vitamin D, potassium, and dietary fiber, as well as some that are underconsumed at specific life stages, like iron, protein, and vitamin B12. And what we found was that very few products were nutritionally similar to dairy milk. And the few that were similar to dairy milk were primarily a small number of soy-based products. So that was the first main finding. The next finding that I'd like to highlight is that even within a category, so if we just look at just the oat milks or just the almond milks or just the soy milks, we found that there are wide ranges of nutrient fortification levels. So that means that consumers really need to know how to read the labels and be aware of what nutrients they're aiming to incorporate into their diets when they're choosing plant-based milk alternative products. So for example, when we think about calcium, we saw that most of the products provide a high or a good source of calcium per serving. But even for calcium, there was no plant-based category where all the products provided a good source. So you could choose a soy-based milk alternative and think that you're getting a similar amount of calcium to dairy milk, only to read the label and find out that it doesn't have any calcium. And the third point that I'd like to highlight is that because we use this public health nutrition lens to look broadly across a variety of nutrients, including some that are not typically found in dairy milk, like fiber and iron, but can be found in plant-based milk alternatives, we were able to consider nutrients that other researchers haven't necessarily looked at in plant-based milks before. And we found that 11 of the 219 products could be considered a good source of fiber, and about 21 of the 219 were a good source of iron. So it's probably too early for us to recommend plant-based milks for fiber or iron, but it is interesting to consider that along with the variability in nutrients that we often think about for dairy milk, like calcium and vitamin D and protein, we also saw this variability in other nutrients that we don't usually think about as coming from milk.
Thank you. I think what you're saying is so incredibly important because so many people today are turning to plant-based milk products, and your findings are really so important as we make recommendations to persons who might want to be using these alternative products. So the next question, what does your article point to as important new research that's needed in this area?
Yeah, we think that the popularity of plant-based milks could have really important implications for the dietary guidelines. Currently, the only plant-based milks that are considered equivalent to dairy for the purposes of the dietary guidelines and my plate are soy-based products that are fortified with calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin D. And our research does support that. But when we look at the consumer data that's coming out of other avenues, we see that consumers are choosing almond and oat more often than soy, which raises a lot of questions for us about how we should incorporate these products into our current food-based dietary guidelines. So if they're not dairy servings and we know people are consuming them, then how should we count them, or how should we make recommendations around them? If they're rich in carbohydrates and fiber and B vitamins, should we be counting them as green servings? Or if they are high in added sugar, then should we be considering them more similar to a sugar sweetened beverage, or do we need to think about them holistically as something else? So we're currently doing research that will help us to better define both the questions and the food groups. And so we can try to think about how we can come up with a system that can be more flexible across food groups to help dietitians make recommendations for how people can fit these into their diets.
And those points I think are so important because we want to look at the quality of dietary patterns today. And what you're talking about is certainly right along those lines. So thank you. And then finally, how might your work help the RDN working in situations that involve clients who may be asking questions about plant-based milk alternative products?
Yeah, I think the key takeaway point from all of this research is that we we see that RDNs are going to need to know about the nutritional variability in plant-based milk alternatives. So if you consider for the RDN working with consumers, label reading and teaching your clients how to read labels to identify the specific nutrients that they need to seek out or that they need to avoid, that's going to continue to be an important and necessary skill. And then from the perspective of RDNs who are working in research, the variability that we see in this product category, if you're trying to understand the dietary intake of a specific population, and you want to use a tool like a food frequency questionnaire, we suspect that it might not be possible to accurately capture the nutritional intake of plant-based milk alternatives from something that asks broadly about the category. And so you're really going to have to think about asking for product name information and brand information in order to make assessments of nutritional contributions from plant-based milks.
Thank you so much. Very, very helpful hints. And I know that these are ideas that RDNs in work settings will be able to use. Thank you so much for that. And the novelty and timely relevance, I think, of your topic is going to be of great interest to all of the Academy membership. And again, thank you so much for responding to my questions. And I appreciate your time in participating in this podcast. Thank you.